Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me at benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcast because People of Distinction is a nationally and internationally syndicated show because of listeners like you. Our shows are available across all major podcast distributors as well as YouTube. And if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. We appreciate the support. Continue to like and follow and sit back and strap in because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Brian Oglesby. And we're going to be discussing his amazing book, Progressives, Leftists, and Black America. How the leftist progressive policies and causes have been bad for Black America. That's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a whole host of other places. You simply got to type it into a Google search bar, and you're going to be greeted with all of them. But if you want to gather everything that Brian has in store, well, check out his personal website. And that's brian-o.com. There, you're going to gather more information on him, more information on this fantastic book, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. So one more time, that's brian-o.com. I want to point out the fact that Brian was brought to our network by one of the best publishing firms in the business. People you already know, I'm talking about Quipper Prints. So if you're a writer out there, you've gone through your process, and now you need help moving that masterpiece you just developed, well, contact Quipper Prints, people, because this is exactly what they specialize in. Now, you got to head on over to quipperprints.com today and gather all of the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Brian here on the line. People, right there in the title and really in the subtitle, yeah, you know the topic at hand today. All right, now we're gonna talk about some things. Now, people, I've mentioned this a number of times in the past. People of Distinction is not a political podcast. We touch up on politics every now and then, but it's, we tend to stay away from the politics more often than not. And more so because politics have become such a divisive thing in our community nowadays. Well, we're going to bring it back to the middle. We're going to be able to have a productive conversation. Because listen, at the end of the day, I don't care where you fall politically. I don't care what you believe. At the end of the day, as long as we can have a respectful conversation and really coexist, we're doing something right here. Now, as I've also mentioned in the past, I am unapologetically a Democrat, right? From liberal perspective and points of views. I also understand that although I look at the Democratic Party and I side with more of their policies, I am not so naive to think that, well, just because I'm a Democrat or just because I'm a liberal, that they have all of my best interests at hand. Because I understand, neither one do everything right. And neither one of those parties are always looking out for my best interest. So I'm open to these discussions. This is going to be something that I'm thoroughly looking forward to. Brian is an absolute embodiment of a person of distinction, man. And his book is informative. And it's about how he believes the progressive movement has hurt the Black community. Not always, but in more recent times. Well, that is something that piques my curiosity. That is something that I'm interested in hearing about and picking his brain a little bit more about why he feels that way. I don't know if I necessarily agree or disagree with all of it, but I'm open to this discussion and I'm looking forward to it. And I know you are all open to listening to it. And I promise you, by the time we've concluded, you're going to be open to purchasing this book because it's a great one and it's one that needs to be added to your shelf. Sit back, strap in. Brian, first and foremost, man, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
Fine, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Brian, listen, man, it is a pleasure to have you here. I think a lot of times your title, just in the title itself, just in the subtitle, that's going to stop a lot of people in its tracks. That's going to make a lot of people intrigued, but it's also going to rub some people the wrong way. And again, we understand politics have become such a divisive platform in this country. I don't know. I don't know if I fully understand why, right? Because I don't think it was always like that. And maybe it was, and I was just younger and I didn't necessarily understand. But I have friends that, man, listen, they cover every side of that political spectrum, and we coexist and get along just fine. So I'm looking forward to this discussion, man. Let's start off first and foremost. Give us a brief overview of your book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, the book discusses the pros and cons of the progressive movement for the Black community over the past 150 years or so. Not just what happened over the past 40 or 50, but it explains how various movements and trends in society and institutions, progressive influence, and how they affected the Black community for their interests, not necessarily in the interest of Blacks. It was only over about the past 40 or 50 years that its negative aspects for the Black community really started to manifest themselves. And so I think what inspired me to write the book was Blacks have contributed, was because Blacks have contributed so much to American society in every arena, but yet they're still in the condition that they're in today, especially in comparison with other ethnic backgrounds. I mean, in business creation and educational attainment of advanced degrees, and as just two examples, and there are others. I listened to a lot of reasons for why the Black community is in the position that they're in, like because such as why did we have slavery and post-slavery injustices, and which current conditions and solutions from a lot of different angles and perspectives. And so I was looking at some of those. I looked at some of the answers maybe the Nation of Islam had, the Hebrew Israelites, Black politicians, and other Black leaders and authorities on issues in the Black community, pastors, YouTubers, so many other ethnic YouTubers and speakers at Black ethnic events, and nothing seemed to be able to really answer this question, why so many other ethnic backgrounds are just outperforming us, I think, in so many endeavors, as just two examples. So after reading and studying other people's philosophies and beliefs, solutions for problems, I compiled some of the best ones I could come up with and put them in one writing, not really knowing if it was really a solution either. But this is what it's come to, my book.
Thank you very much for that explanation, man. Well, I'm curious now because I hear what you're saying. Well, can you provide an example of how left-leaning progressive policies have negatively impacted the African-American community?
Yeah, I got a couple of them. One was the feminist movement, and I know that's going to be really controversial. And one is, this one's going to be more controversial, integration, because both of them were pushed by progressives. And conservatives didn't really want to go in that direction when it was happening. And I'd like to start with the feminist movement. It was the women's liberation movement was the first wave of the feminist movement. And that wave had lots of abolitionists in it, very progressive thinkers, pre-Civil War to World War II to just before World War II, I'd say a little before it. And back then, progressives were liberal. They were really liberal. They weren't leftists and progressives like they are now. And they were open to different schools, and some really good things happened for Black people in the beginning of the movement back then. That was a good time for Black people back then. And then the second wave of feminism was from the civil rights movement till probably about the early 1990s, again by very liberal and progressive thinkers. And this time some things that weren't really good for Blacks started to happen. And the third wave of feminism was from the late 1990s to present, was very liberal, progressive thinkers. And they had some more things that came about that weren't really good for Blacks. it gave black women more influence to change the black community than white women did, I think, in their communities because of integration and some of the interests of progressives and the way progressives steered the black community. But a really bad one was abortion. Abortion was pushed by radical feminists. And over about the last 50 years, since Roe versus Wade, blacks have been only about 12 or 13% of the U.S. population, but anywhere from 29 to 40% of all the abortions. So half of all black babies who have ever been conceived were aborted. Their lives were ended by abortion. So we have a much smaller black community than we would have had if all those abortions hadn't happened. And that was a radical feminist agenda. Planned Parenthood was created by Margaret Sanger, and she was a socialist, she was a Marxist, she was a feminist, but she was also a progressive liberal. Largely advertised it to the public as health care, and now it's being published, advertised as health care and reproductive rights, which are just politically correct euphemisms to math, which has ethnically cleansed blacks from society with abortion. She modeled Planned Parenthood after Adolf Hitler, Minister for Racial Hygiene's policy for ridding Germany of all its Jewish population during the Holocaust. And she has planned it for the black population in the United States. And that was one thing that was terrible that came from the progressive movement for black people was abortion. Another one was the educational system. As education was a tool used to give women an advantage, with the feminist movement, black women outpaced black men at acquiring education and sometimes high-paying jobs. Since they had a double advantage or a disadvantage because they're black and they were women, they still started to do in DEI programs. And since income is crucial for a man in a marriage to be able to provide for his family and be the breadwinner, men aren't as likely to have it. Black men aren't as likely to have as much of it as other men of other races, leaving black women disproportionately more likely to foot the bill. So men and women, they don't care how much their spouses make, but studies have shown when there was a preference, men preferred their wives to make less, and for women, they preferred their husbands to make more. That's from a man's nature to desire to want to be a leader and provider, and a woman's desire to want to be a provider, to be provided for and protected. And it goes against the grain of the way men and women are naturally programmed. But the educational system was changed by progressives, and this is what happened. And men and women, there are a lot of men and women now that didn't get married, and they're in their 40s, and some are in their 50s and 60s who still aren't married because they are men that never proposed to a woman, or no woman, they were a woman that was never proposed to. So they didn't have children. There was no children. That's an existence ender if you stop having children. And feminists, they lobbied to get lots of government benefits for years for single moms. It was a lot easier for them to get a lot of these benefits, the whole package, if you were a single mom, like WIC, SSI, Section 8, housing, food stamps, and more for years, but not single dads if they were children. If they had children, it was almost impossible for single dads to. Mm-hmm. This was not everywhere in the black community, though. This was just in little pockets in the black community. It wasn't everywhere. It was an economic safety net for these black women after integration, which had its disadvantages, too. So no father could be in a home. If a social worker came over to inspect, this gave the mother both power as a breadwinner and the head of the household to put the father out of the household. This destroyed the black family disproportionately more than most other ethnic backgrounds. I think this hit the black community more. But that's what feminists lobbied for women to be able to raise kids like that without a husband. It encouraged black women again, just in these little pockets, just to do it. And now it's been for 2, maybe 3 going on 3 generations now in some places more in the black community, where you've had women that have had a few kids to raise on their own, but that's how they can get this safety net, this money from the government. It expands the government, and it makes the government bigger. And that's what progressives want, bigger government. And so that's what I think. And that was just one aspect of the progressive movement, feminism. But there were others, though. There was a speech that was given in 1900 by Booker T. Washington. There was a debate. The Atlanta Compromise at Booker T. Washington with Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. But the end of the civil rights movement and King's assassination was what really got the ball moving on that one. And Booker T. Washington lost the debate. W.E.B. Du Bois was a socialist, and he won the debate. So I think that kind of a stem that helped progressives get a foothold in the black community just then with that debate.
You know, Brian, moving forward here, man, how do you think conservative right-leaning forces could have influenced different outcomes over the past 50 years?
I think conservatives were more traditional. They had some more traditional values, and women going outside of the home to work and wasn't as traditional back then. You know, women were more like, if the first wave of the feminist movement would have probably happened, it would have probably been allowed, because women got the right to vote with the first wave of the feminist movement, and they got some more rights, because before then, a woman, she was basically, years ago before that, she couldn't. Some jobs really weren't traditional for women to have, and sometimes a woman, her testimony didn't mean as much in court, and sometimes, in some cases, she was almost the property of her husband, which was really wrong. Okay, the first wave of the progressive movement was good because it got rid of all those things, and it convinced conservatives to accept a different view. But the second and the third wave of the feminist movement was when abortion came in, and was when the feminist movement feminized the educational system. And traditional conservatives probably would not have approved of abortion. And because they're more likely to be evangelical Christians, they're more likely to have those original conservative values and not the progressive liberal ones like progressives have. So many abortions probably wouldn't have happened, and this feminization of the educational system probably wouldn't have happened. And there would have been a lot more black people now, and black men would have been done better in school, I think, and they would have been able to marry those women that they wanted to and raise families. And there would have been some better outcomes from that angle for the black community.
People, I'm telling you, this is something you need to add to your shelf. Again, it's called Progressives, Leftists in Black America. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's a whole host of other places. Check out brian-o.com to gather everything that he has in store. Keeping it moving here. My follow-up question now that I want to go into, what are some key recommendations or changes that you propose to address the challenges that you outline in your book, Brian?
Since integration happened and black people moved into white neighborhoods all across the country, they took a lot of the black businesses out of the black community, and the whites, when black people moved to white neighborhoods, they moved out and they took their businesses with them. And so in certain little pockets in the black community, there isn't really a business community. There isn't really anything where you can provide resources and jobs for people like you in your community and have a real community. And black people don't practice group economics like a lot of other ethnic backgrounds do. And so I think blacks need to practice group economics like a lot of other ethnic backgrounds do and have some more robust networks. So that's something that we lost when integration happened, because we lost those institutions, those for-profits and those non-for-profit institutions, kind of like the Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma, when it was burned to the ground in 1921, in June of 1921, and the National Guard, they said they dropped bombs on it, or then they killed a lot of people in it. But yeah, it's gone. But that community that they had was kind of like the little village community that they have in Chicago, that the Hispanics have. And you can see their for-profits. I was driving through Chicago one day, and I went to a conference in Schaumburg, Illinois, and I decided I went to the lakefront. And I drove to the little village community, and I saw their ethnic restaurants and a lot of their shops and their Western unions that they could wire money back home to people. And I saw a lot of their, I saw maybe a PC shop, maybe an appliance shop, and places where you can buy clothes and shoes, and just a community. And I saw Spanish written in front of on the windows and doors of a lot of the businesses. And I saw murals all over the buildings, kind of like maybe something out of Mexico City. And you never see that anywhere in the Black community with Black businesses. But with a community like that, you can really provide a lot of jobs and resources for people in your community. And you can keep them employed and really give them a much better livelihood. In the Black community, since integration, we lost that ability to do it because Black people didn't spend money at Black businesses like they used to. They wanted to integrate with whites, but whites didn't either. Nobody did. So we don't really have a business community like we know. A lot of Black people have businesses, but they're sole proprietorship and partnership, but they're struggling because they're not getting as much business as other people's businesses do. But yeah, so that's what happened. So I would encourage Black people to practice group economics and have a business community.
Brian, who would you say is your intended audience for this book, man? And what do you hope that your readers take away from it?
I think it's intended for Blacks who are frustrated with the state of affairs in the Black community and would like to see a change and why it is like it is from a different angle. And I would say anyone else who would like to understand the dark forces that have come up against the Black community in a negative way.
What role do you think individuals or churches or even community organizations can play in fostering the changes that you're advocating for?
The churches, I think they could have lots of prayer, asking God what to do. The churches are some of the only institutions that have stayed uniquely Black, and they understand the condition and the history of the Black community, so they can have mentorship programs for Black boys and girls, but especially boys, and with no fathers. Them and the community organizers can create a sense of community that can be used to foster a business community and bring back traditions and history and things that uniquely show the Black community in a positive light, which would make people excited about participating and bringing the community back like a revitalization from within.
Brian, final question, man. As we close out here, if you could recommend one action readers take after reading your book, what would that be?
Okay, I think the book was not intended to offend if you're a more progressive person, and how you choose to respond if you're not Black or African American is up to you. But I'd still like for you to go to the Brian Oglesby books and check out the website. And yeah, that's it.
There you have it. Well, listen, people, he said that's it, but I promise you that's not it. We barely scratched the surface. There is so much more. This conversation is ever evolving.
It is.
It is ever changing, and it is one that we need to have. Because listen, like he said, he's not meaning to offend, and I'm not offended, right? Like the conversation, I think, is something very valuable. And there are things that I think are worth discussing. I think they're worth doubling down on. I think they're worth going over. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, you don't have to believe in everything that this man believes in, but we can have a conversation, a fruitful and healthy conversation, even through our differences. This is something incredible. This is something informative. And this is something you need to add to your shelf. So one last time, it's called Progressives, Leftists, and Black America by Brian Oglesby. you got to head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but Brian-O.com is a one-stop shop for it all. You know where to go. Pick up your copies today. Brian, this has been a true pleasure, man. An absolute honor. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being on your show.